Chapter 8. Victory over Jugurtha and growing fame Rome. 86 BC. The Senate has just received word that Jugurtha, the last king of Numidia, has met his end. Cheers erupt as senators congratulate one another, glad to finally see the back of such a dangerous enemy. But two men stand apart from the celebrations, one fuming with anger, the other, Gaius Marius, basking in reflected glory. You are listening to a history podcast. When Sulla marched into the Senate earlier that year to seize control of the government, one of his first acts was to strip Marius of the honors awarded him for his victories over the Cimbri, and Teutones denigrating him in the process. For his part, Marius had been campaigning in North Africa when this all went down, and he did unreturn to Rome until Jugurtha was already a dead man. Now he stands before the assembled throng and listens as Lucius Cornelius Lent, a senator, takes the floor and thanks the gods that at last the tyrant Jugurtha has been slain. Not only has he saved Italy, but he has also avenged the deaths of those killed in the social war. And who was responsible for this great victory? None other than the consul of 86 BC, Gnaeus Pompeius Magno. And while Lentulus is speaking, Marius looks over at Sulla, who sits stone-faced on the bench reserved for magistrates. He then turns back to face the crowd and throws his arms wide open, adopting the pose of a triumphant general. You could almost hear him roar, "Look upon me, the Romans, for I am your salvation." Lentulus finishes his speech, and the crowd erupts. They cheer for Pompey, but they also cheer for Marius. He has come to represent the common man against the machinations of the Roman elite. In short, he is the people's general. The crowd leaves the forum and makes their way to the Basilica Porta, where they storm the rostra and force the aediles to announce that Marius and his lieutenants, Lucius Mummius and Gaius Norbanus, should be granted a triumph. The next day, the Senate meets to discuss the matter, but Sulla cuts it short by reminding everyone that the king of Bithynia has not yet been defeated. True enough, but with Jugurtha gone, there is no serious opposition left. Sulla must be getting toward the end of his life. So let us celebrate our good fortune while we may. But Sulla does not share in the joy. He hates Marius and will not allow him to bask in the reflected glory of Jugurtha's defeat. He therefore vetoes the triumph, and the people are outraged. But Sulla is not finished with Marius. As Plutarch tells us, he still has one trick left. The great man has decided to go to Athens and put on a show there. And so when Marius returns to Rome, he finds the consulship lying empty and his name erased from the list of consuls. What is more? Quattro more. He learns that Sulla has had the record of his campaigns altered to make it look like he was the one who was slow to take action against the Carthaginians and allowed them to escape across the sea. In fact, according to Livy, Marius was given most of the credit for ending the Second Punic War. Now it is as if he never existed. But Rome is fickle, and her citizens quickly forget about Marius. It seems that Sulla has won, but in the end, he hasn't. And here's why. See, Marius was not the kind of guy to stay quiet in the face of injustice. Oh no. If anything, he was even less reserved than Caesar. In fact, many say that Marius was a better politician than Caesar. Here's what I mean. Remember how Caesar used to cozy up to Pompey and Crassus, and always seemed to be around whenever something important was going on? Well, Marius was not like that at all. It was a self-made man who climbed to the top all by himself. He was his own agent, so to speak. That was one reason why he was so popular with the common folk. And it was that popularity that he now used to full effect. He immediately began campaigning for a new consulship. His opponents called him new minted, saying that he tried to appear fresh and untainted in order to win favor with the common folk. But in spite of this, or perhaps because of it, he won election and became consul again in 84 BC. He would hold the office 3 more times. This made him very popular, especially with the common folk. They admired him for standing up to the patricians and holding his ground. In short, he became the champion of the common man and the darling of the masses. Now, you might think that it is strange that Romans would prefer Marius to Sulla, since Sulla was the one who had restored the Republic after the social war. But you have to remember that it was Marius who was fighting alongside the populares against Sulla during the Civil War. To the common folk, he was their champion. Sulla was an aristocrat, someone who would always side with the rich. Marius was one of them. Sulla did realize what was happening, but he was already in Athens, where he spent his remaining years writing his memoirs. Still, he might have come back to Rome if he had felt it was necessary. He was still very much alive and kicking. In fact, Appian tells us that when he was about to cross the Hellespont, an old woman swam out to his ship and begged him to save her son, who had been sentenced to death for stealing one of Sulla's statues. "What kind of crime is it," she said, "to want to be like the gods?" Sulla agreed to spare the boy, but he threw the mother into prison and she died. Later, when news reached him that the Athenians were celebrating, he ordered her released and a wreath placed upon her head. So you can imagine how shocked and outraged the Romans must have been when they heard this story. Still, though, Sulla knew that he could not fight the tide. He was too old, and besides, he was busy with his memoirs. He would write 8 books of his own campaigns, which unfortunately have been lost. Then in 78 BC, he died in Athens, having accomplished what he set out to do: restore the Republic and leave his mark on Rome. Marius would die 4 years later, although we'll get to that in another episode. But for now, let us focus on the contrast between these two men. Both of them were generals. Both were born in the Italian countryside, and both were extremely successful. Yet they were complete opposites. Sulla was an aristocrat who made his way to the top. Marius was a commoner who clawed his way out of the mud. In the end, it was Marius who won the favor of the people, even though Sulla had done more for Rome. The masses hate the rich, and they love underdogs. And so Marius became the hero of the common folk, the champion of the poor, even though he wasn't really any of those things. He was simply a brilliant military commander who happened to be born into a lower social class. The people saw themselves in Marius, and they cheered him as their representative. Every time he entered the city, he rode on horseback without a helmet, even though he had lost part of his nose and one eye in battle. He was too proud to wear a horse-drawn carriage. Even though he had held the consulship a record 5 times, he always dressed plainly and drove a mule. He hated luxury and ostentation, and his frugality was legendary. Once he paid 200 sesterces for 2 figs, and insisted on weighing them on a gold scale. He also paid 500 sesterces for a crust of bread, because it was nicely toasted. And when he hosted a banquet for 7 men, he served 6 dishes of figs. He liked to humiliate rich people who ate too much, and he once chased a senator around his house with a whip. He was that kind of guy. He was a man of the people. Sulla, on the other hand, epitomized everything that the masses despised. He was born into an old and wealthy family. He loved luxuries, and he had little regard for the common folk. He was a typical patrician, cold, calculating, and ruthless. Marius was everything that Sulla was not. He was brash and impulsive. He was not afraid of getting his hands dirty, and he was always willing to help the poor. He was also charismatic and handsome. He had red hair and piercing blue eyes. People loved him, and they would follow him anywhere. In the end, it was not military prowess, but rather personality that made Marius famous. Let me explain. If we measure fame by the number of statues and monuments erected in one's honor, then Sulla easily wins. There are at least 100 known statues of Sulla, while there are only 35 known statues of Marius. On the flip side, if we judge by coins minted during each man's lifetime, then Marius comes out ahead. During his career, 117 coins were minted in his honor. Only 28 coins were minted during Sulla's career. So which man was more famous? By some measures, it was definitely Sulla. But in the minds of the people, it was Marius. And that's why we remember him today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel.